Next podcast with Chris and Todd.
Hey, welcome back to the next podcast. So good to have you here. Todd and I love being able to spend time with you. Hoping that maybe this is one of those opportunities for you to be like, hey, you know what? I enjoy it. Maybe I'll share it with somebody else. Let other people know about the next. Have you heard the next? The next. Anyway.
That's good.
The next. It was a great idea, Todd. Next podcast.
Next podcast.
Todd Lynch, copyrighted. Mark it down.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you.
No, we love talking about a number of different things. And, over the last couple of weeks, it's just been, fun just having those different conversations that we've been having, whether it was youth sports or just moving into serving and different things like that. But sometimes those require like big decisions and some, I think last time we did a podcast, you mentioned the word sacrifice and how does that play in? Because sometimes big decisions require sacrifice. It requires us to make some intentional changes to things around us. And those are not always fun.
No, not at all.
Not always fun because whether there's something that's imminent, something that it just has to be different.
Well, and some of those big decisions, I think a lot of people, you and I have both been on counseling side of this, of just being like, so how do I know God's will for this decision? How do I know whether to marry this person or move or do this job, take those kind of things in life that you're like, how do I make these big decisions? And so we thought today what would be helpful is kind of sharing with you as a church what we've had to navigate of how do we navigate big decisions? How do we get to a spot of like, hey, this is what we must do?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's been going on for a little bit that we've had to navigate is we've actually been experiencing some growth, especially at West.
Yeah.
The 9:30 service is bonkers.
4 weeks ago, was it now? 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, 110 in the lobby.
Right.
110.
And that means the whole auditorium was full already.
Yep.
And so we had 110. So we are just going like, man, we are running out of room at West. Now, we got like 8 and 11 that have some room, but we're struggling to get people to move to that.
Yeah. Yep.
And then we got East location.
And we got Thursday night.
And we got Thursday night. So we're like, okay, you know what we could do? We could just add on and make it bigger to where it could be that. So we looked into that financially. It is expensive.
Yeah, what would be required would be just astronomical. It's crazy when those numbers get added up.
You've all walked through this. Yeah. You're walking through a decision and you're going, okay, let's do this or let's go this.
There always seems to be an easy decision right off the bat, right? Like,
man, if we just did this, this would be great. But then you financially look at it and go, we cannot do that.
Yeah.
And so,
and it never comes in at that number, right? Like,
but here's where you go into big decisions. You can stop right there and go, okay, well, I guess we'll just sit in this. Deal with the pain of that service not being great and just go like, hey, this is where we're at. Sorry. But if it's got a mission component to it, like, no, I feel like God is telling us to do something. Then you got to figure out, okay, well, what's option B? What's option C? Those kind of things. And so that's what we had to navigate. And we're to a spot. Some of you have heard this. If you haven't, here you go. What we're going to move towards is David's going to be being live at West and East now, and we're going to change East to 9:30 and 11, so that way the services kind of match up, and it gives the possibility of growth happening at East and helping West hopefully maybe kind of going, hey, now we can separate this now at 2 locations and do that. But we had to do something. And this is a big decision. A lot of changes coming into this.
This was not taken lightly. And I think that, I think somebody like, did you really consider everything? Because we do that all the time. Like, right? Like, well, did you think about this? Do you think, I believe we have done our due diligence in this. And trust me, this does not come without like those weird feelings of like, man, I wish we could do something differently.
Pain in it.
Yeah, it really is.
It's changing the culture at West and being like, David's been live there for so long and changing the culture at East. And you may go, oh, East is probably exciting. Yes. And we're also nervous. Like, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
But here it goes into like making those big decisions. I remember us as a staff just going, but we have to.
Yeah.
I don't think it's okay for us to just sit on our hands on this and just go, all right, God, I hope you do something. Like,
I think there's an underlying current to it. Like, you can't be afraid to fail, and we talk about that as a team. And
when it comes to big decisions, you have to have that approach.
Yeah, you have to, because man, you've got to be willing to say this is worth it enough that if it doesn't go good, we know that it's not going to just go awry, because we believe our heart and our intention are right. But if it doesn't work, we know that God's got it. Like, but we know we have to do something, and we know that we got to be intentional with it.
So there's the challenge in some of that. Like, when it comes to making big decisions in your life, do you choose comfort or do you choose kind of more to be stretched? Because it's easy once you've made it to a certain spot to be like, hey, I feel like I've built some success in my life, or I've reached something, whatever it may be. And you're like, I don't want to risk that in order to be stretched. And I think if anything I've learned about God, God's going to go like, don't get comfortable.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I had group here a while back, and we were talking about James 1, and it talks about endurance. When you face endurance, when you face struggles, let it be an opportunity for your faith to grow. Let it grow. And man, I think so often we hit those moments of like, oh man, I really got to push through this. Do I want to push through this? And it really says blatantly in there, let it grow so that you can develop your faith. And it really is like enduring through these hard times and these struggles of what do we do? How do we go about it? We believe that God is going to grow our faith and give us a better perspective of who he is and what he wants for his church. And that's not always easy. And the same is true for your family. Like, right? Like you have to make a decision and it just feels tough. It feels like you're battling. It feels like, but God is developing something in us. If our eyes are on him and we're trusting him for what's in front of us, and he's growing in us something that we maybe can't see in the moment, but man, it doesn't say hinder, it doesn't say quit. It says let it grow so that you can develop your faith and it becomes something that you didn't have it before.
Yeah. And for us as a church, I think it's a stretching time to kind of be like, okay, we say we want to show people who Jesus is. We want the gospel to get to everybody. And we had to look at Weston going, here's what's going on. We got people pulling into the parking lot and going, this is crazy, I'm out.
They're gone.
We've got classrooms closing at West, probably what did you say, 8 to 10 minutes before?
Yeah,
at 9:30.
Yeah, 8 to 10 minutes in, because people are lining up to be there. Because I get it, you want to make sure that you can.
But
get in there.
before the service even starts.
Before the service starts.
We got classrooms closed, and so you're just like, man, we could sit in this and just be like, hey, that's what it is. But we went no, and this is when it comes to your big decisions, you got to figure out what are our convictions, like what matters to us. And I go, as a church, as a staff, we had to be like, the gospel being preached to people and them being able to hear it matters to us. And in an environment that is healthy and good, and to see people pulling in a parking lot and pulling out, like, who knows what that person was dealing with today.
I know.
And so that breaks our hearts, and we go, we've got to change something. And so for you, when you're wrestling with big decisions of like, hey, should I move here? Should I marry? You got to wrestle with, where are my convictions in this?
Yeah.
Why am I? What's my motivation behind it? And as a staff, we had to work through that and let God speak into that. Like God, because on some levels, what it's going to do is now East is going to maybe have like, we need to add more volunteers. Like it's going to add more work on some levels.
We are not blind to the reality that in making these decisions, it is going to require more people to step up.
The goal is East would add a service and they would get to 3 services like West. That's work. That's more things, more volunteers, more pieces to do that. And some of that is going like, oh man, okay.
It makes your head spin going,
like,
okay, are people gonna want it? Are people gonna step into that?
And it's new rhythms, it's new all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes I get it. Like I'm a firstborn. I also don't love change as much. I love my rhythms. And so I was kind of like, oh, okay. I know these are the right decisions, but there will be times where I don't feel.
Well, and that's
this is the right decision. And I go, that's where you got to know what are your convictions, because the feelings are going to tell you a whole nother story.
Because the feels will give you that, right? Like you've been at East from the beginning. I came like right as East had just started, and you had kind of spearheaded that reality of like, hey, we're going to go begin East, which was uncomfortable and which was a huge challenge and a big step for the life of Fountain Springs Church, to say, we can't do this at West anymore. It's not attainable. Like, okay, so another opportunity to show people Jesus. And it's had some great moments at East. And I believe the best of what East is going to do is still ahead of it. And it's just really kind of cool to think about what that could look like. Now, I agree. Thinking about a 3rd service at East, that's going to change that dynamic of, well, I've always come to the 11 at East. What if I don't see the people I always see at 11? But man, who knows who's going to be there? Like, who knows who's going to come and get to experience and get to be a part of this in the days to come. And that's where it lies. We realized that we couldn't just sit and do nothing. We had to do something. And to make these moves and to make it's great. I think God put the right people on the team of our church at Fountain Springs to help facilitate and make that happen. And I'm so grateful for our team and the people that play a part in that. But I'm also thankful that we know that we sought God exactly how we believe we were supposed to seek him. And maybe we didn't like the answer at first, but we are where we are now, and we're trusting that moving forward, we're doing what he's calling us to do. So.
And this is the part is like, we're moving, and this is the risk that we take of going from East has always been, and if you're brand new and you've never been to Fountain Springs,
there's an East location? What?
Fountain Springs Church, we started with one location. It was known as our West location. Now we've added two, and that was back in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've got two, the West and East location. And so that's kind of where this conversation is going from. And so then that you're just going, okay, East has always been a video venue.
Yep.
Like, as in, usually the sermons have been on the screens.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been that way.
Yeah.
And so now to change that, you are changing the culture at East to where it's been used to this, and now that part you're like, oh, that will be exciting for them because those kind of things. But what it will do on the other side is West will now have some more video component to it, and you're like, oh, how will that land?
Am I ready for that?
Yeah.
Are people ready for that? Yeah.
And I remember Chris and I talking about it. Like, both of us are kind of like, okay, that's a lot of changes at our location. But that's our willingness to fail and to know this could totally backfire.
Yeah.
Like, West may hate this, and we lose West, and East is better, or maybe they don't like the both and
the back and forth, or
the back and forth, and we got people trying to figure out where's David going to be,
and we're not going to post that.
Where's the live preaching? And you're like, church, and we talked about this in the last podcast, like, some of you have been sitting on the sidelines. Man, we need you in the game.
Absolutely.
Like, we need your help.
We can't do it without you.
And
we don't want
it's not just help because of like, hey, you haven't been doing anything. More just because I feel like God's got you at this church at this time to help us be able to reach more people and give you an opportunity to grow in your relationship with God. Because when you go after that, you're like, man, there are more people, more services, more opportunities for people to hear about God. And that's what we want. And ultimately, not just hear about God, but start a relationship and be discipled into that.
Yeah. No, it is. It's really crazy to think about. And we want you to be a part of that. And yeah, like you're saying, we need you to be a part of that. And just from the standpoint of, we don't know what's coming. We don't know what God's going to do. We're trusting him for it. And like Todd said, like, man, it could fail. It could backfire. But we don't believe that's what our God does.
But even if it does,
we're going to be okay. And because we're trusting him. And that's one of the things I love about how we proceed as a church. We're trusting him. This is not, and you'll hear David say it very plainly, we do not want our own agenda to get in the way of what we do. We want to be a church that is solely obedient to what God's doing and what he wants for us.
Yeah. Because we didn't get our way with this.
No. I think he says that if you've come to Next Steps, David says it very plainly. It ain't me.
Yeah.
And it isn't just about one individual or group. It's about us collectively as God's body working together to make it happen. So,
and I think some of that, I'll go back to there was a lot of time spent in prayer of just going, God, how are we doing this? There was some tough conversations of the realization of like, hey, we can't afford this.
Yeah.
And that's a frustrating conversation.
Yeah.
And it kind of leaves you kind of like, okay, what do we do with that? But you pray about it, you lean into it, and you go, we're not done just because we're financially not able to pay for that crazy expensive thing. And so that just becomes things that I go, as God may be closing a door on something. I mean, you heard this there's another door that opens somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it's true. It is true. The hard part is dealing with that closed door felt like the right decision.
Yeah.
And so when you're making big decisions and that what felt right, what seemed right, what made sense, just know God may close that door because he's got a whole nother path. And sometimes, I would say not sometimes, God's no is sometimes the biggest blessing in life.
Absolutely. And it can't wreck your faith. Because I think so often that, side note, soapbox, right? Like often when we feel like there's a no from God on the one thing that we've been thinking about and believing and praying for, we're gonna be like, oh, that just wrecks our faith. Like, God didn't give me what I wanted. Well, maybe God's got something totally different, and you've got to be willing to press through. That's why we started this with endurance. Like, if you get told no, what are you gonna do to endure? Like, if you get told no, you didn't make the team. You told no, you didn't get the job. You told no, your kid tells you no at supper time. Well, what do I do? Well, you force him to eat it. That's what you do. So. But just
that usually goes great.
Yeah, it does. Listen, I'll be honest. I've been beaten by my own kid not beaten. I was
like, wait, what?
My kids beat me. No,
I think we need to talk about this.
Like forcing them to eat something. But anyway, that's the whole. Like I said, soapbox. What do you do with your faith when God says no, but he's not finished with it, or he's got something else? Are you willing to press through to find out what that is?
And his no does not mean the big decision is done.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And maybe like, and maybe I've got more things. I mean, both of us would say, I'm glad God said no to certain relationships, dating relationships. And
praise Jesus.
And eventually God led me to an awesome relationship with Tina. And God said no to certain jobs and led me to being out here. And so those are moments that I go, but at the time, those no's felt painful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we all are excited to be like, oh, God told me yes, and boom, this happened. We hear those stories. One of the stories I love hearing is like, I heard no, but here's where he led me.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's good. That's rich. Because you actually see that a lot more in the Bible.
Yep. Well, you think of Moses' story. Like, he went back all the times for all those different plagues, and every time was no, or it was yes, and then Pharaoh changed his mind, right? In the story of the Old Testament, like, the Israelites leaving, like going and hearing no again and again and again. But then finally, but he knew God was working. And I think that's the perspective of like, if you know God is working and you believe God is going to make a way, then you have to trust that whatever way that comes to fruition, that he's in it.
Yeah.
And that's why, you seek wise counsel, you pray, you rely on what he says in his word. I mean, that's for your personal life as well, right? Like, you seek wise counsel, that experience that you've had. Trust the God that you know. I've heard that phrase a lot lately. Trust the God that you know. Well, this is who I believe him to be, and he's going to work and move in this. And like I love what you said. Maybe not yet.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, if this is just for a small season, it's for a small season, and that's fine. But man, we're in it. We're all in for what God wants.
I mean, I think of just examples in the Bible, like Abraham is told, hey, I'm going to make you, your descendants as numerous as the sand in the seashore. And he's like, okay, can we start with step one? I need a kid. And they're 90-something.
Absolutely.
But here's what Abraham and his wife tried to do. Like, well, let's try to control the situation. Here's somebody that, one of my servants sleep with her. And look what happens. It creates a mess.
Yeah.
And so this is the other part that I get, like, don't try to control and go, I hear what God is saying, and now I'm going to make it happen.
Yep.
No. Don't. Could you see that over and over again? Even Jacob and the way, like, he forced and tried to control getting the blessing, him and Rachel, that created a family divide for a long time.
Yep.
Even the disciples telling Jesus, no, you shouldn't go to Jerusalem. Like, no, I'm going, and I'm going to die. And they're like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
I'm going to fight, and I'm going to make it. And you see that leading to more confusion and more dynamics that aren't great. And so, but part of that, I go, you're going to have to learn to work through that. Because to say that you will not try to control it,
we have to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah,
right?
like, because every human being wants to be like, I don't like where God's taking this, so I'm going to try to control it. And so when it comes to big decisions, I think humility becomes a big part of this. Yeah. Of going, I pray and I'm doing these, but you're not doing that to manipulate God to get what you want.
Sure.
Because I've seen that too. Like, if we pray and we do this and we're just going to believe that God will do this regardless. And he'd be, I've said no. Yeah. Are you humble enough to hear it?
Yeah, it really does. It puts a big definition sticker on a relationship if we're willing to say yes to whatever God says. And I will say this, because as you were talking, like, when the changes come and you see them and you hear about them, our hope and our prayer is that if you believe this to be your church, are you in with us? We want you to be in with us, and we want you to come along with what's going on and not be frustrated about, well, this is the way that I like it. Okay. Are you willing to go along and trust that we're trusting God for this? And in this season, man, we're excited about what that means, and we want you there to be a part of it. Not just say, well, it's not what I want, so I'm out.
You and I have preferences. We would love for services to be at like 9 and 11 so we don't have to get up so early. I mean, that's a preference thing. Mm-hmm. But the gospel being preached to multiple people, multiple hearing, that's a bigger conviction to me. Yep. I don't want my preferences to get in the way of the mission.
Yep, absolutely.
And so that's another component to when I'm making big decisions, have my preferences got in the way of God actually being able to speak.
Yeah. I would say, conviction is, what are your convictions? And I hope that those come out in the midst of this conversation.
But it is hard. Like once you kind of navigate one big decision and it goes well and you're like, that's my conviction. Yeah. You can start adding preferences to it real quick. Yeah. And so you're like, no. At the heart of it, this is my conviction. This is not going to be easy for me. This is not going to be it's going to be hard on some levels.
And some people have already navigated.
It's the right move.
And some people have already navigated that. I mean, I think we have to give props to those people that have said, hey, I'd love to be there at 9:30 on Sunday, but we're going to make Thursday night work so that we can, or those that have said yes to the 8 or the 11:15. Yeah. And I'm just grateful. Or those that go to East and you're like,
thank you for having that missional mindset.
Yeah, we're grateful for your willingness.
And we'll have the same issue at East. I guarantee you that 9:30 will be packed and 11 will be like, hey, you can check out 11.
Let's be honest. Todd would love to hang out with me at West every week. I just know he would. It would just be so much fun to just have Todd right next to me and be like,
right next to you.
But I have to loan him to East and let it happen. So
that's true. There you go. But we're navigating these changes. It's exciting more because of going, God, we don't know what you're going to do, but we're excited to see you move.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like we've been led to, of just going, God, help us steward this. Yeah. We've got people wanting to show up, but we don't have parking spots. We don't have seats. We've got to steward this better. God, lead us in this. And so ultimately that's why we made the decisions. We got kid space that it's too full.
Yeah.
And we got to figure out how to we got 2 buildings. Let's utilize it to the best of our ability. And so some of that is logically making sense, but in the whole weeds of how all that works, it's hard. It's difficult. And I understand you all are making similar decisions, navigating your family. I remember you moving to Rapid City when your family was very connected in Williston, North Dakota. Yeah. And how hard that was for some of your girls. But you were like, this is the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to now see your girls being able to thrive and being able to, but that took time.
Well, and for, I'll say this because I've been thinking about why we didn't I grew up on hymns, right? You grew up on hymns. All I could think about is like just trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. And sometimes trusting.
Sometimes the simplest phrases, right?
I know, right? You're like, man, that is so elementary, but how powerful it is to trust that even though we don't see what God is going to do, we're going to obey and be obedient to that call, because we believe that's what he's calling us to do. And you go back to what you comment about my family. Like, listen, I wish I could tell you everything that was a part of this. I can't. I need you to trust your mom and dad that we're being obedient. And God has worked and blessed, and it's just been so cool to watch, how my girls react now, and how they interact, and how Fountain Springs and Rapid City has just been such a great place for them to take those next steps. So,
and those are moments where you see God's faithfulness.
Yep.
Where you make these big decisions, and you're like, man, first year or two, man, that was rough. They're all complaining about no friends here.
Yep.
But then to see them thrive year 3, year 4, year 5. And even seeing them beyond. I mean, you got one in college now, and I think that was probably
almost done with college.
That was probably the hardest move for her.
It was.
Because she was like, she's the oldest, has her friend set. I mean, we all know that. We've been in that.
Absolutely.
But now she seems to be in a great space.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy part is, God doesn't take you where sometimes you haven't been already. I moved 2 days before my senior year.
Yep.
You know
that
so And God does. God puts us in place. Like, we have a lot of military people that go through this conversation every 2 years.
But these are big decisions.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the part. We just wanted to be like, how do you make big decisions in life? And how do you know God's will? And it is not this perfect formula, but you got to pay attention to these things. You got to be praying. You got to go, is my humility in the right place? And do I have the convictions that this is the decision that God is leading me towards? And what are those convictions and why? I think that's helped us as a church be able to make the decisions that we're making. And so the same thing for you. This is not just for Fountain Springs. This is for everybody.
Anyone, yep.
So
yeah, we hope that hope this conversation has been good. And if you have questions, feel free to just pull Pastor Todd or myself aside and be like, hey, can we just talk and just want some clarity? Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, we'll try to be wise counsel.
We'll try to be wise.
How about that? As you've seen, sometimes we get a little crazy.
That's right. That's right. One of us is wiser, and that is definitely Todd. So
I don't know about that.
No, but I'm grateful for the conversation, because I think it's just always a good reminder that life is not just small decisions. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a number of small decisions.
And those are important too.
Yeah, but sometimes those big ones kind of throw us off, and they don't have to.
No.
They don't have to. Hopefully they're drawing us into that relationship to the Jesus we know, and what we want to do is be obedient to what he wants for us. That's ultimately, as followers of Jesus, man, the biggest thing. So,
yeah.
Hey,
Good
thanks.
stuff.
You guys are awesome. Have a great rest of your day.
See ya.